Who wants to get us started?
I can go first. Sorry, I had to use my phone because my internet has been bugging all morning.
Oh,
Ah, I don't know if
well,
you guys can see me. I can't see myself.
I can
Can you
see.
guys? Okay. So let me set that there then. Okay. Hi everyone. My name is Vanessa. I'm calling from Providence, Rhode Island. So because I'm working here this summer, and my pronouns are she, her. I go to Mount Holyoke College, which is in Western Mass. My experience with the GRE, I've only taken like a practice test, and so I'm looking to increase the score of that with the hopes of taking the exam in August. But I'm really excited to be here. Um, I Why do I want to take the GRE? Because I want to apply for the deferred MBA program. So I'm looking to get that in the works right now so that I take the exam and I have more time to like work on the application aspect of it. And what's something about you that has nothing to do with like I'm from Tanzania, I guess. That
Cool.
could be something. Yeah.
Neat. Excellent. Welcome, Vanessa.
Thank you.
And just so you know, Vanessa, can you see the slides okay?
Yeah, I can see the slides.
Great.
Yeah.
All right. Excellent. Excellent. Glad you're who's next?
I can go, sir.
Mhm.
All right, so Jonathan Roach, currently calling from Medina, Ohio, just a suburb outside of Cleveland. He, him. I haven't taken the GRE before, but I took the GMAT a few times and had friends recommend I take the GRE since the GMAT just wasn't really working for me. Mostly for the GRE course, I'm looking to get into or use it to get into MBA program about 2-ish years from now. And then I guess something about me, active duty U.S. Army, just trying to use this program to ease my transition back into the civilian life.
Cool. Excellent. Welcome, Jonathan. Um, June, I saw you hopping on the mic before. June, I can't hear you. So I see you're not muted, but I also can't hear you. I think something might be wrong with your audio. All right, while June gets that sorted out, does somebody else want to give an intro?
I can go ahead. Hi everyone. My name's Ariana. I'm calling from Chicago, Illinois. My pronouns are she, her, they. Um, what are my experiences with the GRE? I've taken a practice exam and I'm hoping to just increase my score. And I'm looking to apply for graduate school to get my MBA. Um, and one thing that's not related to the GRE, I haven't been in school for quite a bit, so I'm looking forward to getting back into studying and getting into the groove of things again.
Cool. Excellent. Welcome, Ariana. Who would like to go next?
I can go next. So I'm Zachary, as you all see. I'm calling from Detroit, Michigan. My pronouns are he, him. I've never taken the GRE officially. I've only taken practice exams, and I'm looking to go grad school for either like computer science or data science, or if I do pursue the MBA route, something more tech oriented. And something about me that has nothing to do with the GRE or work. I'm moving to New Jersey next month, so that'll be exciting.
Cool. Great. Congrats.
Thank you.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, now that's working.
Awesome. So yeah, I'm June. Where are you calling from? New York. My pronouns are he, them, he, him, sorry. What's your experience? I think I've taken the practice test a few times, but I really don't know what the actual test's like, so I'm just trying to get some knowledge on that. And I'd like to get placed into some MPAs or maybe a foreign service degree. I'm not quite sure right now, but I do have some ideas. And um, I like to play guitar, I guess.
Cool.
Yeah.
Excellent. Welcome, Jude. One thing I'll just say quickly to answer your question, the real test, quite similar to a practice test. So, the format's the same and everything like that. Of course, like what it feels like to take it might be different because the pressure is different, but it's the same material. Great. Who haven't we heard from yet?
I can go. Hi, everyone. My name's Annika. I'm calling from Austin, Texas. My pronouns are she, hers. I don't have any experience at all with the GRE yet. I'm about to start my studying process. And I want to take the GRE to go to MBA school. And why now is really just because I want to learn and I'm just gonna kind of get the process started. Something that has nothing to do with the GRE is recently I got back from Peru.
Oh, cool. Fun. Welcome, Monica. And who else?
I can go next.
Mhm.
Hey everyone, my name is Raj. I'm based in New York City. My pronouns are she, her. And similarly to other folks, I've taken only practice tests. So looking forward to practicing even more here. And I'm planning to take the GRE in order to get my MBA. And then I have also been out of school for a very long time, also balancing a challenging work schedule. So that'll be fun.
You're not the first. Excellent. Welcome, Raj. Who's next? Ridsky, would you like to go?
Yeah, sure. Hi again, Jerry. I'm from Indonesia. Uh, I pronounce he or him. Actually, I have several experience with Jerry. I attend several classes, and I also did some practice exams. I want to take an MBA, and why not? Because honestly, it's been a while since I been in in a school. So yes, I've been working for the past 5 years. And what's something about you that has nothing to do with work or GRE? I love to dive in the oceans. Yeah, that's something about me. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Excellent. Well, Ridsky, a lot of what we talk about today will probably be familiar to you, but maybe that's what you expect.
Well, one of the reasons why I attend this class again is just because I missed the first session of your class on
Okay, great.
previous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He just was in my course that finished up yesterday, so we already know each other.
Yeah.
Great. Well, welcome back. Good to see you again.
Yeah.
Great. Who haven't we heard from?
I can go. My name's Kelsey Serrano, pronouns she and her, based in New York. Similar to a lot of people in this call, I'm also a GRE newbie, only done one practice test. And why I want to take it, I'm actually just kind of at a pivotal point, I feel like in my life, either I'm going to invest in the GRE now and invest in myself, or continue to work up the ladder with the industry I want to continue to stay in. So still haven't finalized if I'm going to do an MBA or not, but I'd rather have a great score to be able to do that and make that decision versus have to do it really quickly at the last minute. And then something fun. I don't know. I think I jump through a lot of hobbies, so I can do a lot of things. So a lot of nature, a lot of traveling. I guess all the basic things. Most people are interested in. So that's me.
Welcome, Kelsey. And I think we haven't heard from Supriya yet.
Hi everyone, I just joined, so I didn't know this conversation was going on. So my name is Supriya Tanwar. I'm from Nepal. My pronouns are she, her. I have never taken GRE tests till now. So to enhance my career further, that's why I want to take GRE tests and join for master's school. Yeah, that's it.
What is it that you want to study? What kind of master's do you want to get?
Either MBA or MS in business analytics.
Excellent. And what about question 5 up there? Something about you that has nothing to do with your work or the GRE.
I can't really think of anything at the moment.
Do you have a favorite food?
My favorite food is momo. Momo is basically the famous best food of Nepal. Yeah, that's it.
Love momo. Excellent. Welcome, Supriya.
Thank you.
Great. I have a question here. Do I prefer we have our cameras off or on? I prefer if they're on. I'm going to get to that in a second, but it's really nice for me when I can see your faces. So if you're okay being on camera, I would very much like that. And you can blur your background if you like. Excellent. Thank you. Okay, so hi, I'm Jerry. I am right now actually in Berlin, though usually I live in New York City. So it's actually the afternoon for me, which is kind of nice. My experience is I've been teaching this class for like 8 years, something like that. So I know the GRE pretty well at this point, taken it a couple times, been teaching this for a long while. Something about me that has nothing to do with this is I'm also a writer. So I write plays and poems, generally experiment with language. So happy to talk about that another time, but it's sort of unrelated to this work in a way. So in terms of what we are doing today, we've got a couple kind of preliminary things I want to go through about sort of class etiquette, what you need, stuff like that. And then we'll talk about the structure of what we're going through today. So just a couple things keep in mind for today and going forward. Make sure you have a notebook. I said this in the intro email, but we're going to be doing problems today. And it's cool to take notes on your computer, but I really need you to have pen and paper that you can actually do questions with on the page, because part of what we're practicing is like how we use our page, how we move through a GRE problem. I also think it's pretty helpful to have multiple colored pens. Really nice to do the problem in one color and then comment on it in another. Can be a really helpful technique. Invest in some index cards, both for learning vocab, but also formulas and other things we're going to learn today. We need to, when you sign up for the course, you get a lot of study materials, but something I want you to keep in mind from day one is that you need to make yourself the best study materials possible. That's part of your job in going through this course, is to take good notes, make good flashcards, make the cheat sheets that you need to learn the stuff you need to know. And I'm saying that now, and I'll kind of keep saying that because it usually comes around, week 8 or 9 of this course, and somebody's like, hey, do you have just like a cheat sheet of all the stuff that you said in class? And the answer is no. The cheat sheet that of all the stuff I said in class is like all the books, and that's not really helpful. So like you need to make for yourself whatever digested stuff, and index cards is going to be a really good way to do that. Another really good way is a takeaways notebook. Maybe this is a separate notebook or a Google Doc or a separate place in your notebook where you're just putting kind of the big headlines. And I'm going to give you a form for takeaways that I like, but you should figure out for yourself, like what are sort of the big picture things that I can learn from each problem we do. Review log is something we'll talk about next week, but in short, I want to encourage you to keep track of the mistakes that you make. Calendar. We're all adults on this bus. We know how to schedule our lives. Use those skills here. I'll talk about that at the end of class today, but I want you to start scheduling your studying the same way you would schedule any other commitment. And then for class, I'll go over all the course materials and how to find them and how to use them and stuff, but just know that we're going to be using these books. We're also going to be using the Atlas website, which has all of your assignments on. So in terms of some guidelines that I think help make this work best. The first and most important thing is to please participate. This is not a TV show. I'm really here. You're really here. We're in a room together, right? It's a digital room, but it's a real room nonetheless. So let's let this be a conversation. And I'll say, like, today, I'm going to do a lot more talking than I would like to do as the course goes on. Especially as the course goes on, we get to know each other and you know more stuff. Today, I just have like a lot of things to tell you. As we go on, I would love for this to be more of a discussion. And to keep in mind that our goal is not just to know what the answer is. Our goal is to think through a problem together. And I'm interested in all the different ways that we can think through a problem together. So with that, if you can be on camera, really, really helpful. It's like just good for me to get that visual feedback. But also, I'm going to ask questions, answer them, whether that's in the chat or on the mic. You know, I know it can often be tempting to just kind of sit and wait. But again, reminding you, this is not a TV show. So that's also to say, ask questions, right? I am going to do my best to make everything clear. But if I explain something in a way that you don't follow, I'm always happy to explain it in another way and try to clarify for you. Your job is to let me know that I need to do that. And that can be in the chat box as well. I'm never gonna like out you. It's like, oh my God, what a stupid question that person asked. That's never gonna happen, don't worry. Take risks. We're here to make mistakes. That's how we learn. So I wanna really encourage you to try all the problems that I show you today in the homework, in future lessons. It's often going to be tempting when I show you something that's difficult to just kind of sit back and be like, I don't know how to do this, whatever. Try. And if you're stuck, ask me. You know, even if it's like I pass you the thing and for 2 minutes you're working, if you're like, I have no idea how to start, just message me. I'll give you a hint. We can have that kind of conversation. The point is, though, you need to be working, because that's the only way to make mistakes. With that, we have to be supportive of one another. Something might be easy for you that's really hard for somebody else, and vice versa. So try to avoid language like, this problem is so easy, because maybe somebody else was really struggling with it, right? And with that, let's be supportive of each other is struggling with something. Take space and make space. If you find that you're not talking at all, try hopping on the mic and answering a question, or answering a question in the chat box. If you find that you're the first one to answer every time, take a breath, maybe count to 10, and then hop on the mic. Give other people a chance. And respect and encourage difference. We're coming here from literally all around the world, all kinds of different backgrounds. Again, like I said, some things are going to be really easy for you that are really hard for other people, and vice versa. Let's enjoy that and know that, you know, the lousy thing here is we're here to take a standardized test, which is dumb, and I have more to say about that in a little bit. But the nice thing is, there's way more than one way to answer each question, even if there's only one right answer. There's many ways to get there. So we can learn a lot from the different approaches people take. So if this all sounds good, just let me know with like a little thumbs up emoji, or tell me in the chat it sounds good. If there's anything that feels like it's missing, let me know. I also want to say I have a tendency to talk a little fast. If you miss anything, let me know. I'm always happy to repeat stuff. Also got a question in the chat here. Are these lectures being recorded? They're not. And that's mostly because I don't want to put all of you on the spot of being recorded. That can really freeze things up. That said, there are recordings of another class who consented to be recorded that you can find on your Atlas page. So if you miss a class or you want to go back and look over something again, you can watch basically the same material explained by somebody else, which also can be helpful if, like, you know, if you didn't get it the way I was saying it. So what are we doing today? We've been doing these kinds of introductions. So I'm going to start with like a big picture look at the structure of the test and talk a bit about some kind of what the test is, what the test isn't, my kind of overall philosophy of it, and give you some like big picture strategy pointers. We're then gonna spend about half our time on quant, the other half on verbal, and look at just one kind of quant problem, just to kind of dip our toes into how to think with quant on the test. And then on verbal, we're gonna do kind of a bigger overview, look a bit at vocab, look a bit at reading comp, and just get a taste of the kinds of problems that we're going to see. So to start out with, what is this thing that we're doing? The first and most important thing that I want to say about the GRE is that this is just a stupid test. And I really want you to internalize that and sit with it and remind yourself of it. It doesn't measure how smart you are. It doesn't measure how worthy you are. It doesn't measure anything besides how good you are at the GRE. And pretty soon, nobody, including you, is going to care about that. So, it's this hoop we have to jump through. We're going to jump through it. It's going to maybe be painful sometimes, but it's not going to be the end of the world. And it's definitely not going to like finally show you how smart or stupid you are, because it simply doesn't do that. The good news of that is that this test is a skill in and of itself. It's something we're learning to do. So that's to say, it's not measuring how good you are at math. I've had, engineers and computer scientists and mathematicians in this class who are certainly better at math than me. I'm a poet. I'm not great at math. But I'm better at the GRE than them. And that's because I've done it longer, and I know how it works. And that's not me bragging. That's me saying, this is a skill. Just like learning to play the cello, or do a cartwheel, or speak German. And like all of those things, it's a skill that takes time. You can't cram for a week and then play a cello concert. You have to practice for a long time to get good enough at doing things slowly with a lot of thought, so that then you can do them quickly under pressure. And that's what we're doing here. We're essentially building habits so that we can have fluency with the test the same way you'd have fluency with an instrument or with a language. But that's also to say, it's completely learnable. Even if you're like a quote unquote bad test taker, or you're bad at math or bad at English, whatever, you can get better at everything here. Otherwise, this class wouldn't exist. So I want you to internalize that. And then we can start thinking, okay, what is this thing? What is this activity? Well, the GRE, if I'm going to be charitable to it and say, well, maybe there's something it's actually measuring that's helpful, I think it's measuring what gets referred to as executive functioning, which is essentially your ability to make decisions under pressure. That's what this is about. Make decisions and solve problems. And it uses math and it uses reading as kind of the material that your decision making is deciding on. But really what this is about, again, is not how good at math you are or how good at reading you are. It's about how you solve problems under pressure. And the biggest thing about that is how you deal with pressure. Understand that the pressure of this test is a central component of it, just as much as geometry formulas are. This is the pressure that you're putting on yourself to get a good score so you can go to good school and have a good future, all these things. It's the pressure of the clock. It's one of the hardest things about it. They just don't give you enough time. And here's the thing, nobody has enough time. So everybody's stressed. And that's just part of the game. It's basically designed to give you a panic attack, which sucks. And we can know that ahead of time. and say, well, part of my preparation is going to be really learning how to stay in control, how to keep breathing, how to, when I see something tough, say, you know what, that's not for me, not let it shake me and move on. That's the real skill here. And when I'm charitable to not only the test, but to this process, I would say, you know what, that's a life skill. And that's something we all can always get better at and learn a lot from. How we maintain our calm under pressure and how we think clearly under pressure. So the format that we do that in. The test is essentially 3 different tests that get woven together. There's the essay portion. You get 1 essay, 30 minutes, it gets scored from 0 to 6. This is probably the least important part of the test, but you have to do it. You get 2 verbal sections, which get a combined score from 130 to 170, and 2 quant sections, also a combined score from 130 to 170. So notice you're going to get basically 3 different scores. And most schools are going to give you particular scores for each of the sections. They're not going to say, like, we want to see a 300. They're going to say, like, we want to see a 148 on quant, a 152 on verbal. So you can pay attention to these differentially. When you take the exam, the essays come first, which is probably the worst part about them. Just, you have to do it. And then you're either going to get verbal quant, or quant, verbal. You don't have a choice in the matter. A weird thing about the test that you might already be aware of, but maybe not, is that it is adaptive. What that means is it gets harder or easier depending on how well you're doing. What that means specifically is that the first section you see is going to be of mixed difficulty. Some really hard questions, some really easy questions. Depending on your performance on that first section, they will scale the difficulty of the second section. So if you're struggling on the first one, they're going to give you easier problems on the second one. If you do really well on the first one, they're going to give you harder problems on the second one. Your overall score is determined in part by which of these brackets you place into. But notice that there's overlap in terms of difficulty and in terms of score. There isn't really a way you can gain this, but it's worth knowing that it's part of the structure of the test. And especially if you're somebody looking for a top tier score, like over 162 or 3, know that you should be aiming to place into that harder second section, which is tough because that means the test only gets harder as you go along, as you're getting more tired, as you're getting more stressed. It already is getting harder. If the questions are getting harder too, yikes. Just how it is. I'm not saying that to scare you, just to inform you. You take the test on a computer, and the first really important thing is that you can move around. Now, the GMAT has changed recently, so I'm not super familiar with the new format of the GMAT, but at least for a long time, you couldn't move on the GMAT. And that, I thought, made the test way worse. The GRE, you can always skip around. And as you'll hear from me a zillion times, how you move through the test is what makes a good test taker. So we need to already get out of the mindset that this is like a high school math exam where we start at the beginning and end at the end. We don't have to do that. And to be a really good test taker is to figure out how to customize the order to suit your strengths. As you move through, you can mark questions you want to return to. And if you hit the review button, it gives you this review screen where then we can click on a question and go to that question so you can skip around. You also have a calculator. It's a little bit clunky, it's a little bit annoying, but you know what? It's better than nothing. And so I would encourage you not to do lots of mental math. I would encourage you use the calculator. It's there for you, and it's there to, in part, ease some of the mental burden. And that's something you'll also hear me say. That as we go through the test, so here's the metaphor I'm going to use. I've been bouldering a lot lately. If anybody like boulders or climbs, this will make sense to you. Bouldering, oftentimes there's a way you can go up the wall that's just pure muscle, where you basically just do pull-ups all the way up. And you can do that if you're really strong. You can do that once or twice. But then you see like little rangy people who look like they have no muscle at all climbing these crazy routes all day long. And it's because they're climbing efficiently. They know how to not use too much energy. And that's what you need to learn how to do on this test. Oftentimes we'll see a question and maybe you can do it all in your head, doing lots of mental math, really thinking hard, and that's cool. And maybe you can do that once or twice. But if we're talking about taking a test for 2.5 hours, where you have to do that again and again and again and again, you're going to lose it. So we want to think about how we can save energy, and the calculator is one of those ways. In terms of big picture strategy, your score on the test is determined by how many you get right, which like, duh. But there's actually some important corollaries from that. The questions all count for the same amount. So the hardest question in the test that takes you 5 minutes of slamming your head against the table counts just as much as the super easy one you knock out in 30 seconds. And so what that means your job is to get as many easy points as possible. The test is designed for you to not have enough time to do everything and for you to not be able to do everything. So we have to, from day one, release ourselves from the mindset of the high school math test where we're trying to get everything right. It is simply not our job. Even if you're going for a top score, you should not be trying to get everything right. Instead, you should be trying to get as many easy points as possible. So what that means is, if you see something hard, just guess. Mark it if you think you can get it later. But on your first pass, at least, you got to get all the slam dunks before you go for the 3-point shots. Because in this game, they're all worth 2 points. And metaphor complete. So I sometimes think that this test knows the people taking it and is playing to their weakness, which is also their strength. You know, all of you are like, hey, I'm ready to sit on a Sunday morning and do math problems for 3 hours so that I can take this hard test and like go to graduate school so I can have a really demanding, amazing job. Cool. You're ambitious. You're hardworking. That's awesome. And that same attitude can really put you in trouble on this exam. I often find if you see these sorts of people, if you see that hard question, you're like, oh, I think maybe I can do this. I've seen something like this years ago. Let me try. And that's cool. That's a great attitude to have. But then during the test, you're like, okay, let me try it this way. That's not working. Let me try it this way. Let me try it this way and this way. And you wrestle with it and you wrestle with it. And maybe you eventually get it right. And that's so cool. But guess, even if you got it right, you fell for the trap. And the trap was just doing the problem. Because if doing that problem meant you didn't have time to do 5 others, you've made a really bad exchange. So we need to get into this mindset that our job is to maximize the easy points and save our energy, not get everything right. You can take the exam at a test center or at home. It's functionally the same exact exam. At home, you take it on a whiteboard. At a test center, they give you a little packet of paper. That's about the only difference. You have to wait 3 weeks to retake it, and you can take it a total of 5 times in a year. Some other logistical things, and then I'll pause for questions. Your score lasts for 5 years, so I know a couple of you are like, yeah, I want to get this out of the way now so that then I can, a couple of years down the line, do this. That's great. You know that this is the window of time you have. When you take the exam, right when you finish, they're like, great, you're done. Do you want to keep and see your score or cancel it without seeing it? There's really no reason to cancel. I can't think of any. And then you get to either report just this score or other scores. Afterwards, you can send additional score reports. You can pay a fee to uncancel a score, and they'll give you like a little diagnostic thing. It's not super helpful, but it's something. And schools only know about the test you send them. So if you bomb it, they don't need to know. But you can't do a super score. Okay. That's a lot of information I've just thrown at you. What questions do people have? Asked, does Manhattan Prep offer practice material for the writing section as well? Yes, I'll say that we're going to spend not a lot of time on it in class. I'll talk about it a little bit in week 6, but there'll be some homework on it. But again, it's not going to be our major focus, though there is material and plenty of material for you to practice with, that's for sure. Other questions about what I've talked about so far? Structure of the test, strategy. Good question. So within a section, all the questions count for the same amount. And so like that also means it's not like to place into the hard section, you have to get the hard questions right in section 1. It's just how many out of 12 you get. I don't know exactly the math behind behind the black box of the scoring rubric to say like, does the second section, like, is it weighted more? I don't think so. I think it just sort of like, I actually do think it's about just like your overall score out of the 27 questions that you see. And that necessarily means that like your performance in the first one puts you in a cap for the second. That's my understanding of it, at least. Does that make sense, Annika? Any other questions?
I have a quick question. So when you, like, let's say in the first section, if you don't perform as well and they put you in the easier sections, then it's hard to get a high score, right?
Yeah. So if you can, like, you know, if you totally ace that easy section, it's not like you're going to have a terrible score. You're not going to get like a 130, but there's a cap somewhere. Again, I don't know like the exact numbers, but it's not like you can place in that easy section and still get a 165. Question, can you get a perfect score without getting all the questions right? Yeah. You can't get that. To get a perfect score, you can't get that many wrong. But you still might be able to get between 1 and 3 wrong on quant and verbal total and still get a perfect score. It's on a curve. So it's not, yeah, it's on a curve. So again, like I've gotten a perfect score, and there are questions that I absolutely skip. I skip absolute value questions, for instance. I hate them. I skip probability and combinatorics. I hate them. At the end of the test, if I have time, I'll try them. But I also know they're not worth my time in the first go. Part of your job as you're studying is to figure out what are those categories of questions that you skip, just like I have mine. Any other questions?
Did you randomly guess for the ones that you skip?
Yeah, absolutely. So unlike the SAT, for instance, there's no guessing penalty. Does the writing section impact your overall score? Is it a separate score? It's a separate score. So you get a writing score from 0 to 6. You get a verbal score, 130 to 170, and you get a quant score of 130 to 170. All three are completely independent of one another. Anything else? Okay. So let's dive into the quant section. I want to start by giving just an overview of how the quant section works. And then we're going to dive into one kind of quant problem to start building a process for approaching those problems. And this is going to kind of lay the groundwork for a lot of the work that we do going forward. But whether you're here for just the trial or the full class, you're going to leave today knowing how to do one thing, which is nice. So on the quant section, there's three kinds of problems we'll see. Quantitative comparison is what we're going to focus on today. And this is a weird form of question that, to my knowledge, doesn't show up anywhere else in the world. It's this weird thing where you have to compare two quantities. We're going to go over the strategy for that today. What gets called discrete quant is kind of your normal standardized test stuff. You'll get like a word problem, multiple choice, choose all that apply, or fill in the blank. This is the kind of thing you would have seen on the SAT or the ACT if you took those exams. And then there's data interpretation, which shows up on the first quant section. You're going to get a big chart or series of charts and graphs, and then you're asked 3 to 4 questions based on those charts and graphs. Again, multiple choice, fill in the blank, or choose all that apply. The first quant section you get is 12 questions long. And the questions always come in the same order. Quantitative comparison, which is what we're focusing on today. And then 1 discrete quant question, your 3 data inter questions, and then the rest is discrete quant. So this order is always set. What's not set is the difficulty. Question 1 could be the hardest question on the test. Question 12 could be the easiest. And the topics, all totally mixed up. So difficulty and topic is going to be all over the place, and part of your job is going to be to orient yourself. What kind of question is this? How hard is it? That takes time. Second quant section, you have 15 questions. Notice you have about 1:45 on average per question, which in my estimation is enough time to do every problem one time if you know exactly what you're doing. As soon as you don't quite know what you're doing and have to try something more than once, you don't have enough time, which basically means nobody has enough time. Accept it. Let it be part of the thing. Second quant section, you have a series of quantitative comparison, and then the rest is discrete quant. Questions so far before I zoom in on these QC questions? So QC starts out the section for us, and in a very basic form looks like this. We've got our upfront info, we've got these 2 quantities, and then our answer choices are always the same. And it's worth knowing what these mean. A, if A is always greater. B, if B is always greater. Think of it as you're picking the bigger one. C, if they're always equal. And D, the language that we get is the relationship can't be determined. But that's a little misleading. What it really means is it depends. So your job is always the same. Compare these 2 quantities. Sometimes they'll give you stuff up here, sometimes they won't. In terms of your process, the first thing that I want you to do on not only a QC problem, but every problem on this exam is start with 3 things I call PDA. Put your pencil down take a deep breath and actually read the question. You could call it PDR, but I liked that this felt like, what you get yelled at for doing in middle school. Like I said, the test is designed to give you a panic attack. If you are in the rock solid habit of beginning with that deep cleansing breath to arrive at the problem, and you read the whole thing before you start trying to answer it, that's going to eliminate a lot of the careless errors that are just the bane of this test. We want to stay in control. So we start with this deep breath and we read it and we set ourselves. And then we set up our page. And I would encourage you to set it up something like this. Copy down the information that's helpful, give yourself 2 columns, work out the math as you need to, and write the relationship that's on it. So we're going to try our first problem now. I'm going to give you 2 minutes for it. I want to encourage you, start with PDA, and then see if you can keep your page really neat so that a stranger could look at it and understand what you did. And when you have the answer, please send it to me private in the chat. Okay. Send me an answer if you haven't already, please. So, looking at this one, we might think, well, if x equals 2y, then that means the y's have to be smaller and x would be bigger. So then the answer is A. But A is actually wrong. And so the first thing I want to say is if you did it like that, purely in your head, purely based on what things look like, we need to go past that. So don't trust face value appearance. We need to actually test cases and prove the results. Don't rely on mental and concept stuff. So we might say, okay, cool. So let me actually test a case and prove the result. Easy case like this: y equals 1, x equals 2, and the answer is A. But like I said, A is not the right answer. So why is A not the right answer? Yeah, Vanessa.
Because if it was a negative, then that rule would be like, let's say if, yeah.
Exactly. So Vanessa's like, well, there's this weird case. That's an easy case. But with this weird case, the relationship reverses. And as soon as you have two different relationships, the answer is D. So let's think about what else we can take from this. We want to actually test cases. Don't just test one case. First, try something easy, then try something weird. And our goal in doing this is to try to prove D. In other words, we want to get two different relationships. That's our goal. Now, before we go into testing those cases, though, we always also want to ask, is there any way I can simplify the problem first? Nothing wrong with seeing this and saying, this is simple enough, let me plug in. But I might say, well, it's kind of annoying to have to keep thinking about x and y. And they give me this equation here. So why don't I do a substitution? If x is 2y, well, let me exchange x here for 2y. And now I'm only plugging in for y. And I pick an easy case and a weird case. And I get two results and prove D. So I'll have a slide that shows you the whole system here. But basically, the idea is we simplify the problem, and then we pick numbers to try to prove D. Now, in this case, as somebody, at least one person said to me in the chat, you could also get them to be equal if you plugged in 0. All I need is any two of these relationships. And it doesn't matter if for absolutely every number, B is bigger, except for one possible number where they're equal. Doesn't matter. That means it's still D. So as soon as I find one counterexample, I'm done. Which also means that first one I plug in should be easy. Because it doesn't help me to start out by plugging in something really crazy, negative 32.86. Who cares? We just need a result that then we're going to try to get something different from. So start out with the easy thing, like 2. So to look at that process overall again, I'm going to put it through the lens of how we like to think about quant on this test, which is happening in 3 phases. I gave you PDA already. Now I'm going to give you another. UPS. Understand, plan, solve. So first we have to understand the question. Read it through, identify what kind of problem we're dealing with. Are there any topics that are familiar, any language that's familiar? In this case, the format is familiar. It's QC, and I orient myself toward the goal. I'm going to compare them and try to prove D. And then I need to see what's going on in the upfront info. What rules and restrictions are they giving me? I then come up with a plan. I ask, can I simplify this in any way? Sometimes my simplification is going to finish the problem for me, Other times, like this last one, it's not. So I'll pick numbers and try to prove D. And I either don't prove D or I do. We'll keep building on this today and over the next few weeks. But this is the basic scaffolding for the first 4 problems in the first section, the first 5 in the second, 9 of the 24 questions, or 27 questions you're going to see. That's pretty good. So you've heard me a couple times say that we want to pick first an easy number and then a weird number. But how do we know what counts as weird? I'm going to give you your third mnemonic of the day. So we've got PDA, we've got UPS, pencil down, deep breath, actually read, understand, plan, solve. Okay, I'm going to quickly answer a question. Will these slides be available? Yes, you can download them on your Atlas page. And there are recordings you can go back to. You're also welcome to take screenshots anytime you like. Okay, we've got pencil down, deep breath, actually read. We've got understand, plan, solve. Here comes our third mnemonic. Zone F. Sounds like a secret government compound. This is a helpful tool to remember the kinds of numbers we should test on a QC problem. 0, 1, negative, extreme, which means change the scale, right? Rather than trying 2, what happens if you try 10 or 100 or negative 10 or negative 100? Or if they give you a range, getting to the edges of that range. And then fractions. In particular, the fractions between -1 and 0 and between 0 and 1. I don't really care about something like 1.5. So start with something easy and then try the weird things. And in general, after you pick about 3 cases, if you keep getting A, say it's A and move on. That said, don't move on if you haven't checked all of these boxes. If you're getting 3 cases and they're all A, but it's because you're trying 1, 2, 3, guess what? You're missing a lot of stuff. So, to put all that together, understand, unpack the upfront, simplify the upfront, pick numbers using Zone F, and either prove D or don't. Questions about this process? Yeah. Okay.
So after we try 3, like if we tried 0, negative, and a fraction, do we move on or do we test all 5 of them?
It's really going to depend on the problem. Usually, most problems are going to restrict in some way what you're allowed to plug in. So it's pretty rare that you're going to have all 5 categories available to you and they'll for instance. At a certain point, though, you do have to just make a call. And so as you're doing this, you want to try to see like, well, why is it working the way it's working? Also, do I see a pattern? That's going to help you out as well. Okay, let's try one more and then we're going to take a break. So once again, I want you to see if you can start with PDA and then keep your page neat and try to work through this UPS process using Zone F. I'll put Zone up here as well. So we've got all the acronyms in one place. And then send me your answer when you have it. All right. So if you haven't yet sent me your answer, please send it to me now. All right. So would anybody like to walk us through how they approached this?
I can maybe try.
For Donica?
Okay. So I just wrote down like the format that you did in that one slide, like A and B. And then I plugged in 0, they're equal. Obviously, if I plugged in a positive number, like 1, they'd also be equal, and then a negative number, -1 and 1. And that's greater than, there's already 2, so it's probably going to be D. But then I tried 5 and 25 and a half and a fourth.
Okay, let me just catch up to you here. Okay.
Sorry, that was fast.
Okay, so then you did this and you're like, oh, it's probably D. So then you tried 5 and you got 525 and that was bigger. And then you tried what else?
A fourth or a half and a fourth.
Okay, x equals 1/2. You get 1/2, 1/4. Cool. And so then what did you put as your final answer?
D.
Good. All right, excellent, Annika. Any comments for Annika? Because I'm looking at this and I'm thinking she worked a little too hard. Can anybody point out where Annika could have stopped? Maybe Annika also knows, and they were just being overzealous. Annika, I see you nodding your head. You want to explain?
Yeah, I wrote down D once I just started with 0 and then I did -1, and then just like because we had time, I tested the other ones.
Cool, cool, cool. So on the test, you wouldn't want to keep doing this. But if you're like, well, I have time, let me see what happens. That's great. Fantastic. And on the homework, you can do that too. But you should also just mark for yourself, when am I actually done? Okay, excellent. Just making sure you weren't confused about that. That said, Andrea, I like what you're saying. I think this thing about being extra sure is something we need to actually try to let go of. It's one thing to say, I'm interested in how the problem works, and I want to understand this interesting thing, for instance, about how plugging in a fraction when there's an exponent makes things smaller. That said, on the exam, if you've already gotten 2 results, you got to get out, you're done. And we need to also trust, hey, I'm doing the work and it's proving something to me, I need to trust that and move on. So something you can think about as you go through these is, how do I also build my confidence in the results that I'm getting so that I'm not second guessing myself on the test? Really good. Questions or thoughts? Great, glad to hear it. All right, so we've been working for about an hour. Let's take a 5-minute break. We'll come back and do a little bit more of this soon. Okay, let's find our way back. And if you're back but not on camera, just let me know. All right, great. So let's try another problem here. Hopefully you're starting to get the swing of this. Try this out. Send me your answer when you have it. Okay, send me your answer, please, if you haven't already. Even if it's a guess. And I want to start by addressing a question that showed up in the chat, which is, can we make assumptions about the picture? Like, can we assume it's a straight line? Yes and no, or rather, no and yes. Yes, you can assume that straight lines are straight lines. You can't assume that it's drawn to scale, though. So, to my eyes, these two look about the same, but we're told they're not. We have to trust what we're told over what things look like. And if they weren't labeled at all, I would have no way of comparing them. We'll get to that stuff when we cover geometry in a couple weeks, but generally speaking, you can trust that, trust that the straight lines are straight lines, that things intersect where they seem to intersect. Now, who would like to show us their method of doing the problem?
I can answer.
Go for it, Jonathan.
Sir, so for starter off, I made the assumption that it was a straight line and that we were dealing with a triangle, so that the internal angles of the triangle would add up to 180 degrees. So I did 180 minus 110 degrees to get the third angle, which was 70. And then that gave me the data I needed to solve for both y and x. So x should be 110 degrees. And then y would be 120 degrees.
Good. And how do you know?
For if it's a straight line, and there is an angle that is basically a straight line's angle should always be 180 degrees.
Right, these are called supplementary angles. They add up to 180. Perfect. And so we get A.
Sorry, Jerry, is it the reverse of that?
Yes, it is. Doing that not just to make sure that you're awake, but also to point out that this mistake, so yeah, it's actually the other way around. The answer is actually B. To point out that this mistake counts just as much as not knowing any of the math. And so if you fell for that, take note of it. And the note you should take is not like, I'm so dumb. And it shouldn't even be, I got to pay attention. Because, like, pay attention to what? I would say, generally speaking, once you know how to do a problem, slow down a little bit. The temptation can be, oh, I know how to do this one. Then you rush to the end. Actually, you want to slow down just a hair to make sure that you're really in control and noticing where things are and that you're putting numbers in the right place. So if you made this mistake, that's a note you can take to yourself. Slow down if I know how to do this. Double check that my numbers are in the right place. Excellent. Good job, Jonathan.
Wait, Jerry, I have one question. As we go through these practice problems, should we be using like our desktop calculators to get in the practice of using that, or should we just stick to like base mental math?
Oh, you can definitely use a calculator. And in fact, let me give you a calculator widget that you can use here. For the sake of this, I don't care if you're using your phone calculator though, but you should don't force yourself to do mental math. If you want to use something that's like the GRE calculator, the link that I just put in the chat is a good approximation of it.
Awesome, thank you.
Question. For the people who are taking the test in person and don't have a widget on the computer, because you said it's like a paper, they give you paper, what is the alternative for the calculator?
Oh, sorry. You still take it on the computer. You take your notes on paper instead of on a whiteboard. Like if you take it at home, you have a physical whiteboard and that's what you can like do your stuff on.
Oh, okay.
Computer. Okay, great. A really good question in the chat here that I want to bring to the room. We didn't use zone F here. Why? Vanessa, what do you think?
Is it because of because of this, it's based off of set of rules, like for a triangle, like the supplementary angles and stuff. That's why.
So let me ask you this, Vanessa. Stay on for a second. Is it because it's a geometry problem?
I'd like to say yes. Yeah. I mean, exam's a bit finicky because it's based on.
Yeah. What if instead of a geometry problem, it's, they didn't show you this, but instead they said something like, y plus 60 equals 180. X plus.
It's not equations, right? Or could that be the case? Or
you would have been able to actually solve here as well. So it's not just that it's geometry. It's the fact that X and Y are strictly determined by this circumstance. And so we can think of the upfront info as basically defining what am I allowed to plug in down here? And that might be something like we've seen before where it's like, oh, X is an integer. They could say that. We actually haven't seen that. We're going to see that. They could say like X is an integer. They could say X is greater than 10. Or they could give you a shape. Or they could give you an equation. Or they could give you a whole word problem. And the point of whatever's up here is just what's allowed down here. In this case, only one set of numbers is allowed. So that also tells us something about how these problems work. We solve what's up here to plug in down here. We're not plugging in up here. And you need to make sure that whatever you plug in down here adheres to the rules up here. I had a tutoring session recently, and a student made an error that I want to share with you, where the problem is a little more complicated than this, but basically it was as if it said like x is greater than y, right? And then she was like, cool, let me plug in some numbers. Let me say x is 1 and y is 1. Okay, well, that doesn't obey the rule, so therefore the answer is D. This is a big misconception of how these problems function. Annika, I see you sort of squinting, and that is the right response to this, right? Because this rule tells you what am I allowed to plug in down here. Ultimately, this is an illegal plugin. It doesn't work. So it doesn't tell us that the answer is D. It doesn't tell us anything. We have to plug in something that obeys these rules, which up here is quite strict. So what that means is we have to simplify that upfront info first and understand what they're telling us. And as we saw here, that can sometimes finish the problem. So let's try another one, a little bit tougher this time. Send me your answer when you have it. Okay, great. Send me your answer, even if it's a guess. And I'm going to send you into breakout rooms to talk about this, getting a couple different answers in the chat. So see if you can all come to an agreement about this and talk about, if you're all in agreement about the answer, talk about what's the best method to get there. How did you get there? Were there different approaches that people took? A couple different ways to think about this problem. So I'll give you a few minutes to work.
Even in that case, I do think like those numbers do still function very similarly. Like they're still whole numbers, they're still both negative. So your outcome will be drastically different with this type of formula.
Good. Okay. So you're exactly right, Kelsey. This doesn't tell us anything that this didn't already tell us. And you know that -10 or -1,000 also doesn't tell us anything new, but that's because you see this analysis. So I'm trying to think, maybe it's a more complicated problem, or maybe I don't want to see this analysis for whatever reason. We need to still think with zone F. And if we're thinking with zone F, we might recognize, well, I can't do 0, I can't do 1, I already did a negative, I can't do a fraction, and I need to try an extreme. And I'll say extremes sometimes make things different happen. So don't count it out just because it's also negative and an integer. In this case, though, I like -10 because then I can just count the zeros. Easy to use. And at this point, I would be very confident that the answer is A. Maybe because I see this analysis. Maybe because I tested an extreme and I see a pattern that not only is it A, but it's really A as the x gets more negative. Or maybe it's because, you know what, I've used zone F. That's nothing else to try. Any questions or thoughts here? Getting the sense you all are really doing well on this, so let's try one more challenge problem. And then, or actually, let me talk about this a little bit more. And then we'll try a challenge problem. So basically, you know, as we're trying to test for zone, using zone F, trying for D, if we see a pattern or we tried about 3 cases, we need to make a call. And I want to just point out that the way they set up the problem determines what the answer is. So in this case, the one we did, got it. But if they had checked that x is an integer and just changed the range that x could be in, well, now x can only be -1, 0, and 1, all of which give us C. if they didn't give us any restriction, I could prove D pretty easily. If they got rid of this integer thing, well, then I would need to also try this extreme of going close to -1. And that's pretty annoying to do, but I'd still get A. And what's illustrative about this is to visualize what's going on, and if this confuses you, please don't worry about it, but if it's helpful, great. Here, the red line is a graph of x cubed, and the blue line is a graph of x to the 5th. Again, something you're never going to need to do on the test, which is visualizing this. And I want you to just notice that we have these different zones, that they're equal at -1, 0, and 1. X cubed is greater in these two ranges, or sorry, x to the 5th is greater in these two ranges, and x cubed is greater in these two ranges. And you might notice how this lines up with zone M. And we can think of kind of these different zones. And the reason zone F is what it is because these different places tend to behave differently for most math stuff. So maybe that's a little helpful, maybe it's just confusing. Either way, let's try. Send me your answer in that. Okay. So to start with, we might unpack this upfront info. X is an integer between 61 and 67, which means we've got these 5 options here. So send me your answer when you have it, please. And then I would love to hear somebody to walk us through how they approach this. Anybody? Maybe somebody we haven't heard from yet?
Hi, Jerry. I can go.
Go for
Sorry, I'm kind of sick, so if my voice goes, or it might go in the middle. But first, I read the items in the stem. So the n is an integer, and then 61 is less than n, or n is greater than 61 but less than 67. And I did the same thing. I wrote out all the integers that are in the range of the question, and then I freaked out because quantity A was really intimidating, and then I was like, maybe I should just guess. And then I took a deep breath and I was like, let's work through some of these. So then I tried at least making a factor tree for 62, and got to 2 and 31 and was like, okay, well, that's greater than 1. And then I went to 63, did the same thing, and then I realized that none of these are prime numbers. So all of these will have more than 2 factors. So then that's how I landed on A.
Fantastic. So I really thank you for sharing that. I love that. I love that you were like, oh my God, this is so intimidating, I can't do it. And then you were like, okay, let me just like start and see what happens. Fantastic. And then you sort of, even though this was intimidating at first, you cracked the problem. Basically, this is asking, are any of these prime? And you figured that out. And you said, oh, none of them are prime. So it's A. Really excellent work, Andrea. Any thoughts or questions about this? So I think that's a good lesson. If we see kind of intimidating language, take a breath, try to unpack it. And if you have time on the test, try to just start working something out and see if the pattern emerges. So, yeah, and I want to note, getting this in the chat, yeah, this is not a case where we're using zone F. Because n is so strictly defined, we don't really care about zone F anymore. We kind of just care about these 5 integers. All right, so to close out our quant lesson, okay, we have a question here. So let me try to explain this again, unless that person would like to hop on the mic and kind of ask their question more specifically. I think what's important to understand here is what exactly this is asking. The number of integers greater than 1 and less than n that are factors of n. So let's just look at n equals 62. So we have here 2 integers that are factors of 62. Basically saying, besides the number and itself, how many other factors does it have? This has 2 other factors, which is greater than 1. 63 has got 4 factors, greater than 1. If we do the rest of these, we see, okay, this has got 5 other factors, greater than 1. 2 other factors, greater than 1. 6 other factors, greater than 1. And we don't need to actually find the number of factors here, is what Andrew was saying. Because the only case that B would be bigger would be in a case like if n equals 67, there's actually no factors there, which would be less than 1. Because that's not the case, our answer is A. So yeah, this is asking for kind of a weird thing, but understanding what this number means is kind of the important bit. Question of How do we know 67 is less than? I'm not sure I completely understand because they tell us n is less than 67. I understand your question now. So like if n is 67 here, yeah, so 67 is prime. So it's not like a prime rule. It's just the only factors of 67 are 1 and 67. Same as if we had like an easier prime, like 5. 5 has no other factors. So this would be a big goose egg, which would be less than 1. Does that make sense? The question was, is there a rule or would we just have to test that? We're going to cover prime numbers next week, so you can kind of hold that question a little bit. But basically, a prime number is a number whose only factors are 1 and itself. And it's worth memorizing the first few primes. And basically, to check if something else is prime, just try dividing it by these things. Again, your homework is going to have some work about divisibility and factoring and stuff like that. So you'll get a little bit more of an intro to this. This is just sort of a peek ahead of the topic. So before we finish up our quant lesson, I want to offer, remember I said before that you should try to make the best study materials for yourself that you can. I want to offer this form for you to do so. Of when I see X, I do Y. This test works in patterns. And so your job is to try to recognize patterns. And those can be patterns about what the test shows you, like the wording or the setup of a problem, but they can also be patterns of the kinds of mistakes that you need to avoid. So for instance, for me, I have, when I see restrictions in the upfront of a QC problem, I write them on my page and like digest or interpret it somewhat. What I mean by that is like that X is an integer less than -1, I write X equals -2, -3, -4. That's a specific takeaway for me because I know I make that mistake often. You want to try to identify the kinds of takeaways that you can make for yourself as well. And I've got some here based on today's lesson. Any QC question, we follow UPS. Simplify, pick numbers, and try to prove D. When we're picking numbers, we use zone F, starting with something easy and then weird. When I get 2 different results, I pick D. If I keep getting the same result, I make a call after trying about 3 cases. So something I want to encourage you to do is as you do your homework, write your own takeaways, especially if there's a problem that you get wrong. Ask yourself, what's one thing that I could learn that would make me just a little more likely to get it right next time? And try putting it in this form. When I see, I do. Any final questions or thoughts before we move on to verbal? So, we're going to do a brief overview of the vocab questions and reading questions, and then talk about how to learn vocab on the test. So there's 2 kinds of vocab questions we'll see. The first are called text completion, or TC. They give you a sentence with 1, 2, or 3 blanks and ask you to find the words that best fill those blanks. Just like the rest of the test, there's no partial credit. Sentence equivalence is the other type, where they give you a sentence and only 1 blank, and you need to pick a pair of answers that both fill that blank. So basically, you're looking for a pair of synonyms. Again, no partial credit. Your first verbal section is going to start with vocab, and then you get some reading comp, vocab, and reading comp. Second section, same format, but the proportions are a little different. Again, vocab, reading, vocab, more reading. And note that you have a little bit less time on verbal than you do on fluent. So we'll start with vocab. And here we've got little warm-up vocab question. Send me your answer. Take a look, give it a shot. Only select one. Okay. So, if you try to do these in a way that you read the sentence and then plug in the choices and see which one works, you're going to find yourself very frustrated because you will probably find that many, if not all of them, work. And in fact, you might find yourself already confused or frustrated on this problem because this is a trick question. And it's a trick question because any of these could work. The way this is written, it's basically asking for your opinion about what word you like there. And frankly, any of them, including yes, E, you can imagine a sort of organ donation gone wrong, makes sense. And so the test can't possibly be asking for your opinion or your experience of the world, because that's going to vary for every person. What that tells us is the test has to write these sentences in a way that determines only one correct answer. So let's fix this. Take a second and read it. And notice that now we have clues in the sentence. He ate 10 pieces of pie and then complained because his stomach was hurting. So only one answer works now because they've set up evidence in here. Now, note that the right answer just reflects what's in here. It doesn't add any new information. I could imagine a world where he eats 10 pieces of pie and then complains that his stomach is empty. He's like, I could have more pie. Bring it on. Come on. That's an interesting story. But notice how the word empty suddenly makes that an interesting story. If your word does that, you're doing this wrong. You want your word to very boringly reflect what's already told to you in the sentence. So before I show you the overall process of this, I'd request to go back and look at this slide for the order of verbal section 1. So now, let's talk about our verbal process. We start a verbal problem the same way we start any problem, with PDA. Pencil down, deep breath, actually read. And then all of verbal happens in two phases. P, E. Phys ed, gym class. Predict and eliminate. Importantly, you always need to have a sense of what you are looking for before you start to look for it. I want to remind you that there are people whose literal job it is to write answers on this test that will confuse and fool you. So you need to have a shopping list before you go shopping. And when you go shopping, think less about, oh, that's exactly what I wanted. If you see that, that's great. But more you want to be in the mindset of that's not it, that's not it, that's not it. Oh, I guess it's this one. And know that on verbal, there's a little bit more guesswork, a little bit more of a numbers game. Most often, if I can get something to an 80% confidence rating, I feel good about it. Oftentimes, I'm choosing between 2, maybe even 3 different answers to do that. That's just sort of how it works in verbal. And the curve is a little bit more generous as a result. So what this looks like specifically for the vocab questions we're looking at is start by only reading the sentence. Then use the proof in the sentence, what evidence they give you, to predict your own fill-in. This fill-in should add no new information and should ideally reuse language from the sentence. Can't always do that, but it's really nice when you can. Then we forget about the sentence and we just compare each choice to our fill-in. So at this point, I suggest you write on your page A, B, C, D, E, and mark as you go. And as you go through, you can mark with a check if it's a good match, an X if it's not, a squiggle if it's so-so, and a question mark if I don't know the word. Keep in mind, squiggle and question mark are actually quite different from one another. And it's okay to fill your sheet with question marks. It's going to help you guess, actually. So let's try this out in a problem. Here we've got, this sentence is not blank because it is simple. So we read it, we cover up the answers, and prepare our page, right? A, B, C, D, E. And then we look at what are the clues that the sentence gives us. Okay, it's not something, it is simple. So I'm looking for something that means the opposite of simple. So notice there's 2 things going on here. The evidence and a direction marker. And these are things to look out for as you're reading. So we read for the overall sense, and we read for evidence and direction markers. And based on that, we come up with a prediction. Could be complex, could also just be not simple. Doesn't have to only be one word, doesn't have to be smart. So we use that evidence to predict a word, and then we look at our answer choices. And at this point, we kind of forget about the sentence and just compare each choice to the word. Does complex mean clear? No. Does ugly mean complex? Not really. Does confusing mean complex? Maybe, kinda. I'd give that a squiggle. Same with long. Sorta, kinda. But convoluted, that's pretty on the money. And I would say long and confusing add additional meaning. Something could be complex without being long. Something could be long without being complex. This starts to tell a different story, whereas this is pretty clearly attached here. So that's what our process looks like. We want to make sure that our match matches the tone and degree, right? That it's not too strong, that it's not adding additional meaning. For sentence equivalence, we do much the same thing. You read the sentence, come up with a prediction, and then the only difference is that here we need to pick two answer choices. So we again compare them to what we want, and also notice that something can be wrong because it doesn't have a match. Our pair needs to have a match, and often there's going to be at least, one, maybe two incorrect pairs as well. Okay, so that's our process here. In sentence equivalence, yes, we're always selecting two. Any questions about this process?
Quick question. So like sometimes we just don't know the words though.
Yeah.
So at least that one was a bit like simple but then how
Yes.
do we come back?
Yeah, I mean, that's something we're going to talk about in a couple weeks. The short answer I'll give to you is mark the words that you don't know and make decisions on the words you do know. And so sometimes that's going to mean, okay, I know three of these words and I don't know two of them. The three that I do know, I know aren't it. So I'm going to guess between the words I don't know. And that's fine. You do a lot of that. And know that no matter what, you're going to see words you don't know. But there's no trick for like learning what a word means by staring at it. So part of the key is just like move quickly. Other questions? So let's take a 5-minute break and then we will try this out a couple times. See you in a bit. Okay. Let's find our way back. If you're back but not on camera, just let me know in the chat, please. And had a question during the break I want to just give everybody the answer to, which is like where to download the course slides. It's on your Atlas page under downloadable resources. Scroll down for a bit and you'll see something. It says GRE for MBA 23.04 course slide, something like that. It's maybe that number will be different for you, but that's what it's under. Can I get rid of this? All right. So let's try one of these out now. I've got a sentence here with a blank. Set up your page, read this, and I'd like you to send me in the chat your prediction. Okay. Send me your best guess here, even if it's feels sort of random for you, just try. What's your feeling? Okay. So there's a tendency to do something to retired leaders who are successful. And this stems from a need to venerate people and gods. So we don't want to base this judgment on what do people do to leaders? Who knows? That's going to differ for each of us. We want to base this on what else do we see happening here? Something is happening to leaders. Something's happening to people and gods. That thing is venerating. And this stems from, as our direction marker tells us, oh, this second part is just going to repeat the same idea as the first part. And then if you're like, oh, what's a really good word that means the same thing as venerate? Stop. Venerate. All you need. So now that we have our fill-in, let's look at the choices. And I suggest write on your page A, B, C, D, E. And remember, you can mark with a check, X, squiggle, or question mark. And try to do this swiftly and honestly. Send me your answer when you have it. All right. Send me your best guess. So Vanessa earlier asked, like, what happens when we don't know words? I would bet for many of you, there's at least one word here you don't know, and that's okay. Try to just notice, like, what that feels like. Does it throw you into a panic? What do you do with that? And again, we want to only make decisions based on the words we know. So let's say, for instance, I didn't know A, C, or E. I'd want to start by asking myself, does remember mean venerate? And it's close, but I would say it's not nearly strong enough. We're talking about what we do with gods. That's holding them on a really high regard. Remember is not enough. Neither is appreciate. And so if you have this and you're like, okay, take a 1 in 3 guess, go with your gut. I see the word lion. People like lions. Sure, it's C. It can be that simple. And C actually is the answer, and that is sort of the etymology of lion eyes. But you didn't need to know that. And if you're sitting there and you're like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, you have the rest of the test to take. Just pick one and move on. It doesn't matter. And know that everybody's going to be in this situation at some point. And then, since we're studying, write down the words you don't know and learn them. Castigate means to criticize. Indemnify means to compensate for damages. The opposite of condemn is to indemn, like release from responsibility. Lionize is exactly what we want. It means the same thing as venerate. So let's try another one. Sentence equivalents this time. Send me your fill-in when you have it. Excellent. Really like the answers I'm getting here. Picking up on that, the research what's surprising is the ideas have given birth to two related yet. Okay, so something that opposes in some way related. And now we can look at our choices. Now you need to select two. Send me both of your answers, please. Okay. So ones we can get rid of kind of quickly. Suitable, impactful, and ambitious don't have any match and don't really mean different. Divergent, complementary, and incongruous, though, all could mean different. So how do we decide between these three? Anybody like to share their reasoning? Monica?
If anyone else wants to go, they can go though. Okay. I don't know if my thinking is correct. I don't really stand by it, but I immediately saw Divergent and I was like, okay, B is probably one of the answers. And then I was really debating between D and F. I personally, if I was reading the question, I probably would have put in complementary, but then I realized that incongruous was closer to divergent than complementary. Um, but then I could like see the rationale for both complementary and incongruent because related is closer to complementary. So then I got confused, but I said B and F.
Okay, and so if I'm understanding you right, you said B and F because these two are a better match for each other.
Yes.
Whereas complementary, if you put it in there, makes sense, but doesn't mean the same thing as divergent.
Yes, exactly.
That logic is 100% on board. Great job. I have a question. Why do we think complementary means different? You know, some people do, some people don't. I think for two things to be complementary, they can't be the same. But the point is, this adds meaning that doesn't exist here and doesn't exist with B and F. Now, I got a really good question in the chat earlier about what do we do with words we sort of kind of know? So to go back, the vocab here isn't necessarily as challenging. Let's look at this sort of tougher vocab here. And let's say I'm like, okay, castigate. I know I've seen that. I could like use it in a sentence, but I couldn't really like define it for you. Give it a question mark. Even if you're like, and I think it's wrong, give it a question mark. So let's pretend we have this same thing. And let's say I have no idea with C and E. B and D I can prove wrong. Castigate, I'm like, I sort of kind of know what it means. Start it as a question mark. And then as you're guessing here, that's when you listen to that kind of gut feeling. For the word you sort of know, now I say, okay, I'm going to say it's not A. And now I'm doing a 50-50. But I find so common, people make, like the most common error I see here is people saying they know a word when they don't actually know the word. So like, be a little conservative and be liberal with your question marks on the first go. And then on the second go, you can start to use that gut feeling stuff. Okay. Where are we? All right. So that about covers it for vocab questions for now. I want to talk a little bit about reading comprehension, and then we're going to talk a bit about vocab before we sort of wrap up and talk about sort of the structure of the course and homework going forward. So reading comprehension, you're going to get passages, it'll be like 1 or 2 paragraphs, and typically 1 to 3 questions on them. You'll also get argument passages, which are going to be very short and only have 1 question, and that's going to be something about the structure and logic of the argument. Most are going to be the multiple choice. Some are going to be select all that apply. Some will ask you to like pick a sentence that does something. But what I want to focus on today is the question of how we read on this test. So here's the beginning of a fake passage, which has fake words in it, which is not something the real test will do. But I want you to start reading this and then see if you can figure out what's this passage going to be about. Okay. Who can tell me what the passage is going to be about?
I think it's going to be about traditional methods of I don't know how to pronounce this word, like Zerlich mining and how it harms the environment.
Very good. Very good, Zachary. A less good answer would have been to just say it's about the mining. Because what about it? So as we're reading, when we start off at the beginning of a passage, we want to look for what we'll call the simple story. Not only what's the thing, but what's happening. That thing is causing damage. Oh, suddenly there's a narrative that I can follow. Because I'm thrown into the middle of something I don't know anything about and didn't ask to read about, you have to really work in the beginning to orient yourself to the simple story. And then you try to follow that story. So we slow down in the beginning and pretend like you're at a cocktail party and somebody is talking about something you don't know anything about, but maybe they're kind of cute. So you want to try to show up and feel like you can hang. So the way you're going to do that is by first figuring out, well, what are they talking about? Okay, there's this mining that's causing damage. Great. Now I'm going to follow that. How does the next thing fit into that story? Oh, is the damage really bad? Are people working against it? Where is it? How does this fit into that idea? And then as you start to get your bearings there, then you're like, okay, what do I expect? I expect to hear about how people are fighting against this. I expect to hear about the long-range consequences of this. So reading in an engaged and curious way is how we want to approach these. I also want to say you don't have to understand everything. We just want to get the big picture on the first read. So take your time in the beginning to really understand what are we talking about, and then you can speed up a little bit and just say like, okay, how is this developing? Knowing that you'll come back to it as you need to for the questions. So here's a passage for you to look at, and I'm showing you the two questions here. Some people like to read the questions ahead of time, some people don't. So that's up to you here. I'll give you a few minutes to read, and then we're going to start looking at the questions together. Okay, so you've had a little bit to read this. We're going to start with this first question, but before then, I just want to remind you our process here is PDA, predict, and then eliminate. So this first question asks us the primary purpose of the passage. And we need to call to mind some kind of prediction. What was this about generally? Well, generally we're talking about insect behavior, how it seems pretty inflexible. The rest is sort of details, but something about that feels right. And so for a primary purpose or main idea question, that's the kind of prediction you need to make. Just generally, what was this about? And then mark on your page A, B, C, D, E, and judge each of these choices. Send me the one that you choose. Okay. So, looking at this, who can eliminate an answer and tell us why?
I would eliminate C. It was just an example used during the passage, not the primary purpose.
Excellent. So this is sort of too narrow. Excellent. Vanessa, you had your hand up?
Yes, I would eliminate D as well because D yeah, sure, but D.
Oh, D. Sorry.
D for dog.
Okay.
Because they just mentioned it to further like explain the fact these are like experiments carried out that in fact they are inflexible.
Good. We're also not really contrasting their work.
Yeah.
You're exactly right. These are sort of examples supporting something. This isn't the point of what we're doing here. Good. Who else can get rid of one?
You could get rid of B because they're not saying that they're unique.
Good. That's a pretty big claim right there. That's not supported by the passage. And then how about between A and E?
I would eliminate A
How come?
because when I read it, like um E E was more specific with its answer because it said the insect behavior relies on rigid routines. And as we could see, they carried out some examples to be able to back that up with the rigid routines. Like every time they tested, the wasps never changed their what's it called? Their response. And then even unconsciousness was the added detail that they had mentioned earlier, which I picked up on. But then in terms of like proving based, I mean, it does inherently like prove and based on examples, but then I I would say that's not the purpose of like I don't know.
Okay, that's great. So Vanessa, I think your intuition is really in the right direction here. Does anybody want to hop on board or argue against it? Kelsey?
So yeah, I also did not pick A, but that's because like I do think he's generally suggesting that this is the case from examples, but I don't think he's proven that that's always the case. Like I think the fact that he says that they can actually do lack consciousness is the problem. And similar to what Vanessa said, like E is a stronger point of like actually just reconfirming exactly what we just read.
Good. So I want to just, A and E are quite similar, but E is right. And it all comes down to the intensity of the language. A is proving that insects lack consciousness. That's a very definitive statement that's not supported here. Whereas E, notice how neutral it is. It's arguing, it's not proving, it's arguing that the behavior relies on routines which appear to be unconscious. A is like, we know this is the answer. E is like, this seems to be the case. 99 times out of 100, this is what we're going to want over this. So something to be on the lookout as you go through here are, first of all, things that are sort of too narrow, but also things that I would say are extreme, that go further than what the passage says. So some examples of extreme language, things that must happen, proving, resolving, only, unique. These are almost always wrong. The kinds of things we like are more neutral and wishy-washy. things that seem to be the case, that illustrate, that discuss, that might be. So we want to be on the lookout for these language cues as we go through. They're only one tool, but a powerful tool for helping us choose between answers. I want to address a question that came up in the chat. Somebody was asking about, like, I can tell that this must be a piece of a larger article. Can I judge my answer based on what I assume that larger article is about? The answer is absolutely not. Only base your answers on what they exactly tell you. And I find, especially if you have a background as like an English or lit major, it can be really tough not to interpret. And that's really your job here. Do not interpret. You want to just reflect very, very literally exactly what's there, which also means not interpreting it as proof, for instance. So that's the first kind of reading prompt question we'll see. Primary purpose questions, where they ask you about the big picture generally. And the answer we wants to cover as much of the passage as possible, not only about a little bit, but about the whole thing. And the kinds of wrong answers we'll see are extreme language, things that are too narrow, or things that just kind of rehash details, but in a way that doesn't really answer the question. Let's take a look at our second question. Basically, why does the author mention the work of Darwin and Fabre? Or Faber? I don't know. Here are our choices. Come up with a prediction. Go back and decide for yourself. And then take a look at these and pick an answer and send it to me. Let's find our way back. Send me your answer if you haven't already, please. So we're a little bit low on time. So I want to just walk us through here. Somebody said this before. The reason these show up is they're providing evidence for this claim about the grasshopper. So we want something about providing evidence. A, contradict is a little bit strong, but really it's like, what is the conventional wisdom about typical wasp behavior? We don't know. B, totally unrelated. C, sort of feels nice. It feels very official and stuff, but like, what does that mean? It's not exploring the implications, it's giving evidence for it. And we're not highlighting changes. Instead, C, sort of middle of the road. And notice how it's restricted. One kind of insect behavior, not all insect behavior. So, a detailed question will ask you about something specific in the passage. To come up with your prediction, go back to the passage and find the proof. And then look at your answers, knowing we're looking out for extreme language, looking out for things that are outside the scope of the question or unrelated to the question, and things that reuse language from the passage, but in a way that doesn't answer the question or is unrelated. I had a request to go look at this slide again. This is primary purpose. And those are our two kinds of reading comp questions we'll look at for now. We'll cover some more in the coming weeks. Those are big major categories. I want to talk for a little bit about how to learn vocab. We may run over a little bit today. Apologies for that. So the kinds of words that we're going to see on this test are academic and can be applied across different fields. They're not like scientific terms, for instance. The best way to study is the old classic flashcard. And if you make your own, that's the best possible thing. That said, if you're like me and you're like, you know what, I'm probably not going to make them. Just use pre-made ones. Doesn't matter. Yes, this is better, but the best thing is the one that you actually do. So if you know yourself and you're like, I'm not going to put in the time to do that, that's okay. Get some pre-made ones or use an app. But I still want you to try to get the most out of this. If a traditional flashcard has the word on one side and the definition on the other, this is sort of a lousy way to learn something because you're just trying to memorize a definition completely out of context. Instead, what you want to do is basically put as much stuff as you can on the other side of the card. Simple definition, a simple sentence that's creative and memorable will help you use the word, help you remember it, give some context for it. You can use mnemonics, and a source for that, it's sort of hit or miss because it's hit or miss because it's open source, but mnemonic dictionary can be helpful. Make sure you notice the tone. Is it positive, negative, or neutral? And what other GRE words are related to it? Maybe they all mean the same thing, or they all have the same Latin root. Giving yourself more context like this will help you learn the words faster, even though this takes longer to make. In terms of what words to study, in your homework this week, you're going to find a GRE word list that gives you 50 words a week. This is a great place to start. If you can do 50 a week, amazing. Try to get at least 20 or 30 per week. Now, vocab, like everything on this test, is not something you can cram. We're going to be studying for this test for months. which means we need to get in the habit of doing a little bit every day. And that's going to help you remember it forever. So a method you can use to help you with that is what's called a Lightner box. And I'm going to give you a quick rundown of this. You may want to take a screenshot of this slide, look at in your homework, there's more of a description of it, or you can Google Lightner box. But basically the idea is that you have 3 piles of cards. New cards go into deck 1, and you look at these every day. When you look at a card in that deck and you're like, I know that word, it graduates to a deck that you only look at twice a week. When you look at that and you're like, yeah, I know it, it graduates to where you look at it only once a week. So basically, the better you know the word, the more time you give yourself before you look at it again. And if you look at it here and you're like, great, I know it, you're done with it, you know it. But if at any point you look at the word and you're like, I actually don't remember what that means, bring it back to deck 1 and add something new to it. Write a new sentence, put some new related words on there, write a new mnemonic. If you do this work where you really take the time to make a rich flashcard and then look at it over the course of a couple of weeks, you will know it forever. Some other tools you can use. YouTube, really helpful, word of the day videos from Manhattan Prep and other people. Flashcard apps, here are a couple. Again, if you know you're not going to make your own, but also these will let you make your own. And a lot of them will also sort of do that Lightner box stuff for you. You can also buy pre-made flashcards. Also, I would encourage you to start reading outside of your areas of expertise and interest. Try to read GRE type articles, especially about the kinds of stuff you didn't study in college. So if you're not used to reading science passages, start reading Scientific American. If you were a computer science major, start reading book reviews in the New Yorker. Try to learn how other fields talk and stretch your reading mind. That's going to help you a lot for the test. Okay. Next thing I want to talk about is like overall planning and homework. Again, we're going to go over a little bit. Before I do that, any questions about vocab, reading comprehension, anything we've talked about so far? So this course is 9 sessions long. And if you're studying a lot, you're able to put in, 10 plus hours a week of homework. And you're not looking to increase by more than like 4 or 5 points. Great, take the course, expect to study for 2 to 3 more weeks, take the exam and expect to take it more than once. That's normal if you're not going for a huge increase and you're studying a lot. This is the slide that has the worst news on it, so I'm sorry in advance. If you want to make a big score increase and you can't study a ton, take the course and expect to study for another 1 to 2 months before you take the exam for the first time. Expect to take it more than once. Like I said at the beginning, this is like learning a language. It doesn't happen quickly. The course is going to prepare you by exposing you to everything and giving you all the tools you need. Having those tools is different from being fluent with them. That's what this is about. If you're looking for a really big score increase, or you can't do that much homework each week, expect this to be a long process. For all of this, I would encourage you at this stage in the game, start building good habits of studying. So what that means is schedule your studying, put it in your calendar and hold to it. Take good notes, review, but also make studying pleasant. Give yourself a little treat. Go for a walk afterwards. Do something nice afterwards. don't make it that you're punishing yourself and whipping yourself into shape. Try to make it something that you can sustainably do for the next couple months. Know that generally, from day one until 2 weeks before your exam, we're in this phase where we learn things, we practice them, we review them, we learn them over and over again, trying to raise our score. 2 weeks out, things change, and you try to just develop your game plan. And at the end of our time together in this course, I will tell you about how to do this, and we'll talk about sort of the difference in these phases, and I'll give you all the tools you need to keep going on your own. But for now, I want to tell you about the resources you have for the course and how homework is going to work. So the Atlas page is going to be our syllabus. And each week you're going to see different categories of work. Follow the syllabus. I think it's a good syllabus and it's well organized. Don't make the mistake of just trying to work through the book from the beginning to the end, because that's not going to follow how our course works. So instead, when you click on, say, Quant, click on the exact assignment, and it'll show you the problems and the page number where you can download the ebook. Mark the problems that you finish. If you mark the assignments that you finish, it'll keep track of your progress as well. The work is split up in between essential and recommended. Try to get through all the essential. Do the recommended that seems like it's going to help you. And if you find you want even more practice, in the recommended section, you can add additional practice tasks. That may be for when you do sort of a second pass through the syllabus and you want to work on particular skills. Most of the work we do is going to be out of these books, which you also have as ebooks, which I think are quite good. That said, most assignments are written as read or watch, and that's up to you. And you can either read the book or you can work from these interactive videos, which are also very good. It's up to you the best way that you learn. I would suggest this week, try to experiment with both and see what you like. Some work is also going to be from the official guide, which is a little bit annoying. The explanations aren't always clear, but it's important to practice on real GRE questions, so that's why we use this. You also get the 5-pound book, which we're not going to use very much during class, but is going to be very helpful after the course is done when you want to just drill particular skills. This question about when is the GRE open and closed to take? It is open 365, 24/7, baby, now that it's online. So anytime you want. Okay, vocab list, we talked about that. You're going to download that this week. There's also practice exams. You get 6 from Manhattan Prep. There's 2 more free ones through the people who make the GRE. You save these for when you're close to the exam. And these, as we'll see, you can gather data on as well, which is helpful. If you haven't yet taken your first one, make sure you do that this week. There's also recordings. Under course information, course recordings. This is another class, somebody teaching the same material. It's all representative of questions on the test. The 5-pound book, the beginnings of chapters are sometimes a little bit more just like on the fundamentals of the topic. And then they get into GRE questions. They move from easy to hard. But it's not like you're going to see things in there that you wouldn't see on the test necessarily. Although some of the super hard stuff in there is like, you're not going to see it. But the official guide is the only one that has actual GRE questions, as in like they were on real tests. All the Manhattan Prep stuff is just stuff that we've written to imitate that. Okay, other resources. You can contact me anytime. I'm always available after class to talk a little bit one-on-one if you have questions about homework or questions about anything that came up during class. I'm always happy to do that. You can also email me anytime. You have my email. I'll send an email when the course is done today. If you want additional one-on-one support, you can buy tutoring packages. and it's not cheap, but it's there. Yes. The question was what practice test to take. It should be the Manhattan Prep practice test, not the ETS one, Manhattan Prep one. Sorry, I know I'm rushing through this. I don't want to keep you guys too late. I'm going to say a couple last things, and then I'm going to take questions. For your work this week, try to work short, frequent sessions and make takeaways. Make your own notes. Work with a blank stack of note cards and try to give yourself, make study materials as you go through. Take a little bit of time after class today and look at your calendar for the week and decide, when am I doing these assignments? Really plan it out and keep them as appointments. In terms of our course, we're going to move on the quant side each week with a new topic, moving from stuff that you see all the time and is pretty fundamental to stuff that you're not going to see very often is pretty advanced, generally going easier to harder. On verbal, we're going to kind of flip-flop between vocab and reading, getting harder as we go along as well. We're taking our first exam this week. If you haven't taken it already, we'll take our second one after week 6, after we've already learned a lot of stuff. Okay. I think that's all I have right now. Again, sorry for the rush, sorry for all that. Questions for the room? Otherwise, I'm happy to talk one-on-one with folks.
Wait, after we do the practice exams, will we have space in these meetings to like go over any problems, or should we just email you that?
That's something to email me. I have like a curriculum like today that we'll go through, so we don't have time to look at individual problems from the homework. But we can do that. You can email me and we can look after class.
Well, thank you.
Other questions? Okay. Well, thank you for a wonderful first session. I want to put in the chat now, in case you are here for the trial and want to sign up for the full class. Here is the link to do so. Again, happy to stick around and answer questions one-on-one for a bit. Otherwise, thank you very much. Good luck with the homework this week. Reach out if you have any questions, and I will see you all soon.